guys, this is Tyler Johnson back with part 5 of the grinder in a box build. We're getting really close, almost done. I left you last time, pretty much had the whole thing built as far as the idler arm on and everything ready to go. I just had to take it all back apart to paint it. So I've got all the parts painted now. I think I have all the rest of the parts I need to finish it off. So in this session we're going to go through finishing up the build and look at the motor and the controller that I'm using, and we'll start looking at the tool arm as well. I got one built already for the multi-platen. So hope you enjoy the rest of this build. Hopefully I get it all done in this last section. We don't have to have a part 6, and let's get going. Okay, so here's the grinder without the idler arm on. Everything else is in place. I have the shock already installed. We already talked about that in the last one. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and get all this put together just like I had it done in the last series, the last video. And once I get that done, I'll come back and we'll reinstall the motor and we'll start looking at the controller. Okay, so I wanted to show you guys the progress. I've got the mount for the shock on. This is the finished idler adjuster, wheel adjuster, and then I have the actual spring mounted. So I'm just going to finish tightening everything up, and then we'll be back to install the rest of the wheels on here and get the motor installed. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get the idler wheel installed. This is a Beaumont Metal Works wheel. It's a 3.5-inch idler wheel, I believe. I do have the machinery bushings that are not regular washers. Guys, remember, regular washers are going to cause a problem because they'll end up covering your whole bearing race or potentially your whole wheel, and it's going to cause you a problem. So make sure you're getting these machinery bushings. I got mine from McMaster-Carr. You can get them from USA Knife Maker. You might be able to find them at your local hardware store. It better be pretty well stocked, I found, for the machinery bushings. It's kind of a hard thing to find in the local hardware store around me, at least. So this is just pretty simple. I'm just using I happen to use a grade 8 bolt here. You don't really have to use a grade 8 bolt. I went with, I think, the final dimension that I came up with for the bolt. It's a 1/2 inch, obviously. And for the idler wheel, it's a 3-inch bolt. So put one, sorry about that, put one machinery bushing on the bolt head side, and then the machinery bushings come in different widths, and in this case I'm using 3 of the larger. It's really only two standard widths. It's a 14 gauge or a 18 gauge. So I'm going with starting out with 4 18 gauges on the inside to get my spacing correct. Not sure if that's going to work. I'm going to have to do some adjusting once the thing's running, make sure it's all good. But that gets it out enough away from the wheel holder itself, the wheel adjuster. And it's just a simple matter of just bolting it on and tightening it down. That's really it. Next we're going to get to putting the motor back on and start working on that. Alright guys, I'm back. I just wanted to show you before I get the motor installed the piece of plywood that I used to bolt this to. It's a 16-inch by 16-inch piece of 3/4 inch ply, birch ply. Pretty strong stuff, but you can use anything you want. You can use MDF if you like, but I'd go minimum 3/4 inch for strength. Especially because for me, down the road I'm going to put a heavy-duty piano hinge on here and then bolt that to another piece of wood that will be bolted down to the bench, and then this whole unit will be able to flip on its side for horizontal grinding ability. That's down the road. I'm not going to tackle that just yet. I want to get this thing done and grinding so I can get cutting some knives. These holes right here, those are going to be for the mount for the VFD, for the variable speed controller. This mount is from Beaumont Metal Works. I bought it stock from them. It's a really nice mount. It's out of 1/4 inch steel. If you notice here, these holes and this weld line, that is the height of the original mount. I ended up needing more length to get my VFD a little higher so I could clear the back of the motor. So I just added a 1/4 inch piece by 2 inch piece of steel, transferred the hole locations in, and that got the right height for me, and I felt that was the easiest way to go about it. So this one, this is up to you guys. This is a $29, $30 piece, I think. It's pretty expensive. You could certainly build your own mount. I thought I was going to go the easy route. It did end up being a little more work, but I really like the way it turned out, so I'm pretty happy with it. So we're going to get the motor installed and start working on wiring it, and I'll be back for the next process. Okay, I'm getting ready to install the motor. This is the motor I'm using. It's a Leeson 2 horsepower, 3-phase motor. It's obviously can handle 208 to 480 or 460 volt. So if you're going to do a VFD, guys, make sure you're getting a 3-phase motor. If you don't get a 3-phase motor, it's not going to work right with your VFD. The wiring schematic is on it. I'm not an electrician, guys. I have experience in this a little bit, enough to do it myself, but I'm not giving you advice on how to wire this because I don't want to be responsible if you happen to fry your motor. So my recommendation is, if you're not comfortable with this stuff, talk to the people that you bought your product from, the people that sold you the motor and the controller, and they should be able to help you out. Also, most of these usually have a wiring schematic on it, so follow that wiring schematic. If you don't know how to follow a wiring schematic, look it up. But this is my disclaimer. I'm not going to be responsible for you guys wiring your unit wrong. I'm not going to tell you how to wire it because there's too many combinations out there. I'm just showing you what I'm doing. And then here's that VFD controller mounted on the board, ready to accept the controller. So we'll get the motor put in and we'll start working on wiring this sucker up and get her running. Okay guys, here's a view of the motor installed, and if you notice, I've got button heads installed there. Now the reason I did that is because I ended up getting that motor without the base feet on it, so I'm having to rely on this thing being fastened into it with just these 4 bolts. And what I found is on this back bolt right here, if I used anything taller like a socket head or even a hex head, the belt tended to rub on it. So by putting a button head in here, it gave me the clearance I needed. So I think that's going to work out pretty well. And we're going to move into the drive wheel next. This is a Beaumont Metalworks 4.5 inch drive wheel. It's got your set screw in there. It's keyed for the shaft. Your motor should have come with a piece of key stock that fits in the shaft, just like that. And then you just take this unit and it just slides right on. Pretty slick and easy. Now I'm just going to put it on far enough. It's going to have to be adjusted down the road and just tighten it so it stays on. But we'll do a final adjustment on it later once we get the belt on. So that's the motor. Pretty much complete as far as being installed. I still have to wire it, so that's what we're going to move to next is our wiring. And with that, this is going to be our KB27D VFD controller. Now I did a lot of searching around, and I looked at all sorts of different stuff and read all sorts of blogs, and there's some Chinese ones out there that are cheaper, but it seems to me that this is pretty much the industry standard. I found these on Wholesale Electric Motors pretty cheap. They were under $400 for this setup, and you know what? I just decided to go with what everybody else is using and what they're having good luck with. There's been some complaints about the other, like the Chinese ones that are programmable. I didn't want a programmable one personally. I just wanted a pot adjustment that was very straightforward and simple. I didn't want to screw around with programming. So if you guys want to try a different controller, by all means, try a different controller, but this is the one I decided to go with because everybody has the most luck with it. Alright, so we're going to get to wiring this right now. Okay, here's the internals. Now for my power cord, I went ahead and I used a 12-3 SJ cord. You can find it at a lot of different hardware stores. Home Depot carries this particular stuff as well. You're going to be pushing 20 amps through this on a 220 circuit. Use 12 gauge wire, don't skimp on that. And then if you can see here, I'll come in on it. This is the line M block where power comes into. Again, I wanted to do my disclaimer, guys. I'm not an electrician. I'm not training you how to wire electrical or deal with 220. If you're not comfortable with it, have somebody you know do it. Definitely talk to the people that you bought your stuff from, the manufacturer. They'll help you through. So please be comfortable with this before you attempt it. I can't be responsible if you do anything that I say to do here and you either injure yourself or you destroy your unit. So this is my line in. I've got 2 powers coming in. This white I've recolor coded it to red to indicate that it's power. And then obviously I've got my ground. This block is where the motor control wires are going to go in, and that's going to be a 12-4 SJ cord. Now I had a little more difficult time finding that. I ultimately had to order it online to get it, a small chunk of it that I needed. And this is what's going to be going out to the actual motor itself. So something that I also learned, and I learned this through the literature obviously, but also Travis Wirtz from Wirtz Machine Works that makes that TW90 grinder that's so nice. I was talking to him at a knife show about this process, and he wanted to make sure that I understood this jumper right here. See, it says 115 and it says 230. Okay, that's 220, 230. If you're going to use this on a 115 circuit, you can. You move this jumper over to 115 and you wire it to a 115 circuit, and you'll derate your motor a little bit, but it will still work if you don't have a 220 outlet close by. However, if you wire this to 220 and have it on the 115 jumper, you are going to smoke this motor. The whole thing will be done. So if you're going to put 220 into this, make sure this jumper is on 220. And this one came on 220 from the factory for me. So I double checked it and I made sure that that's where it needs to be. So if you guys are converting, starting out at 120 and then down the road you're getting somebody in to get a 220 and you decide to switch over to 220 and you forget to move this jumper back over, you're going to fry the motor. If you don't move it and you're running 115 and you're keeping it, this is left on 220, it's just not going to operate, but it shouldn't hurt the unit. So just keep that in mind, guys. That's very important. Okay, so what we're going to do now is prep the cord. Okay. Now this process is pretty delicate. As you can see, you've got 4 wires in pretty close proximity to each other shoved in there. You don't want to take a razor knife and do this, because you will not be able to do it without nicking the insulation on the inner wire. And this is silicone insulation. It will cut easy and it'll break over time. So what you want to do is take it, lay it on a flat surface like this, find between 2 wires and very delicately run your razor knife down between those 2 wires. Be very careful with it. It's going to take multiple passes. You don't want to do it all in one swipe or you'll cut the interior insulation. But once you get that to open up just like that, you can pull it back. Now I need a little more, so I'm going to come back here just a little bit longer, and it's going to separate pretty easily for me. And you can yank this back for as much as you need. Okay, so that should be enough for what I need to do. So now, once you've gotten it to this point, there's a couple ways you can do this. You can take your utility knife and cut it, or you can take a pair of dikes and come around here like this and cut it. This is what I like to do. And I just get all this out of the way first. Make that as clean as I possibly can. It's not super critical. And then you want to take all this paper, peel all this paper back, and cut all that off. Be careful not to cut into any of your wires. And get all that out of the way. Okay, the next thing we're going to want to do, What I like to do before I even strip any of the ends, sorry about my camera work here guys, I'm working off of a limited camera, and this is, again, this is all, filming is all a learning process for me too, so we're going to get this set, and what we're going to want to do is feed this cord in through this liquid tight fitting. And it's going to be a little tight, so you're probably going to have to spin it and pull at the same time to get it to go. There it goes. And if you're not paying attention, like I did, you'll forget to put this on your wire first. So I was just doing that to see if you guys were paying attention. So we'll get that sucker back in there, just spin it in nice. It should go pretty good. There you go, and then I just bring the rubber just up to the top and then go ahead and tighten this down. Just hand tight for now is all you need. Okay, so I'm going to cut away for a minute. I'm going to get all these wires stripped on the end. You only need to take, I don't know, less than a 1/4 inch off each end. I am going to put a fitting on the ground, and I'll show you that, and the ground will come over here. So I'll get all that set up and we'll be back. Okay, we're back. Here's the fitting we're going to put on. This is a 12 gauge. It has shrink wrap tubing on it, and it's a pretty simple process. You just take some wire strippers, nice and slow, get that stripped off, twist it up nice, and then you slide your fitting on. That's simple. And then all you do is take a pair of crimpers and you just crimp that down so it holds nice and tight. And always check your fittings. Okay, and then you just take a heat gun or something similar, like you can even use a torch. That's, you got to be really careful if you're using a torch, and you shrink this down first. Now you don't have to use heat shrink, it's just what I have. I like them. You can use a regular connector, but that's just the way I like to do it to make sure I've got a nice secure fitting. Okay, I'll get that shrunk down and we'll be back to do the rest of the wiring. Okay, fitting's all installed. Just back one of these ground screws out, place it in here, and it's just a simple matter of tightening it down onto the case. This is really important, guys. You want to make sure everything is grounded. You're dealing with high voltage. Well, it's considered low voltage, but it's still 220. 220 will kill. So get that tightened up, and then we could start routing our control wires for the motor itself. We'll be back for that. Okay, so I'm going to start with black, red, and then my white. These are all going to be carrying power. So I'm going to line them out as nicely as I can. Get the length cut, then come in here, take off probably about a 1/4 inch worth of insulation. Back this screw off. Make sure you have this nice and tight. And sometimes it helps to have a pair of needle nose. It will help you get that in there all the way. Now, electrical connections have to be tight. So I'm not telling you to break this thing, but make sure you get that thing nice and tight, because electricity it modulates. It has a frequency to it, and as electricity flows through, it will actually loosen up your connections. So I just measure out where I want that, give it a good cut. Again, guys, read your manual, talk to the manufacturer if you're confused, talk to an expert. Don't take my word for this. This is your responsibility to make sure you're wiring this right. Make sure you have good metal contact. Alright, and we're down to the last one. That one goes straight in. This one's going to be a little tough to get in there, but we'll get it. Sorry, my hands are in the way here. Back this out all the way. Like I said, this was going to be the booger right here. There we go. And tighten that down. And that's pretty good. Okay. So that part's done. Now I got to just mount this onto the bracket.